Most people don't remember the exact moment their life shifts, but for Daniel it was a Tuesday morning in late October, in a laundromat that smelled like lemon soap and burnt lint. He was 29, living in a small town in northern New Jersey, working as a barista in a cafe that didn't get busy until noon. He dropped out of grad school the year before, moved back from Boston, and landed in a dusty one-bedroom above a bakery that opened at 4 a.m. every day and made the walls smell like sugar and yeast. He didn't mind. The rent was cheap, and the hum of early morning life comforted him in a way he couldn't explain. His routines were simple. Coffee at sunrise, a slow jog around the park if it wasn't raining, then work, then home. He cooked alone, read worn paperbacks from the library, and sometimes sat on the fire escape at night just to watch the headlights pass. That Tuesday his washing machine flooded, again, and he finally gave in and hauled a basket to the place 3 blocks down. The laundromat was mostly empty. 2 older women whispering in Spanish, a teenager asleep against a dryer, and her. She was folding sheets with the kind of rhythm that said she did it often. Arms out, flip, press, fold, stack. She wore headphones but wasn't listening to anything. The cord hung disconnected near her jacket, and when she looked up at him, just once, he had the strange, immediate sense that he'd seen her before. Not in that town, not in a memory, but somewhere more subtle, in a dream, or a different life. He didn't speak to her that day, but he saw her again 2 days later, at the bookstore. Then a week after that, at the small corner market where people still used paper bags. Eventually he asked her name. Her name was Elise. She lived 3 buildings down, worked odd hours for a local publisher, and walked everywhere. She had an old bicycle she never rode and a collection of scarves for every kind of weather. She loved lemon candies, old maps, and movies from the 1940s. She hated voicemail and left her phone on silent almost always. Their connection was slow, unassuming. It started with a walk, then coffee, then a night where she didn't want to go home. So she sat on his couch while he made scrambled eggs at 11 p.m. She wasn't what he thought he was looking for, but that didn't matter. They spent most evenings together that winter, reading, talking, sometimes just sitting. There were no grand declarations, no sudden rush, just a quiet accumulation of moments that made the days feel less like placeholders and more like something real. They started sharing groceries. He learned how she liked her tea, strong, no sugar, how she always wore mismatched socks, how she couldn't sleep unless there was music playing softly somewhere in the room. She learned about the scar on his chin, the way he lined up his shoes in perfect rows, the story behind the guitar he never played. On weekends they browsed flea markets, picked over used records, made pasta from scratch even though neither of them really knew how. They got flour on the ceiling and laughed about it for a week. They didn't talk about the future, not because they avoided it, but because they didn't need to. Everything felt very now, and yet from the start, there was always a shadow over it. Not tension exactly, but the knowledge that it wouldn't last. Elise was planning to move. She had applied for a job in Oregon months before they met. It was everything she'd wanted. An editorial position at a nonprofit press, hiking trails minutes from her front door, a place to start over. She'd almost withdrawn the application when they started spending time together, but she didn't. And when the offer came, she didn't hesitate. Daniel didn't ask her to stay. She didn't ask him to follow. Neither of them spoke the words they both felt might ruin everything good. The last few days were quiet. They cooked favorite meals, took long walks without talking. One night they stayed up until sunrise, lying on the rug in his living room, watching the ceiling change colors. He asked if she believed people could belong to more than one place in a lifetime. She didn't answer. On their final evening, she left him a book on the counter, one they had talked about but never read together, with a note inside. "You made this winter feel like spring." He kept it for years. She left on a Monday morning. He helped her pack the last of her books into the back of a borrowed van. They hugged goodbye on the curb in front of the bakery. No promises. Just a long, quiet moment where time softened around the edges. He didn't hear from her again. Life moved forward. He eventually moved to a different apartment, then to a different city. Got a new job. Fell in love again, differently but sincerely. Married. Had a child. He aged in the usual ways. Thinning hair, back pain, a growing fondness for early bedtimes. But sometimes, usually in the early morning when the house was still, he'd find himself remembering the weeks with Elise, the warmth of her in his bed with cold feet, the way she always rewound a movie if she missed a line, how she once cried while listening to a jazz album she couldn't explain, the weird way she cut apples into squares, the time she danced barefoot in the kitchen, just because it was snowing outside. There were small, lingering traces. A scarf she left behind that he couldn't throw away. A song she'd hummed while chopping garlic. A note she'd once scribbled on a napkin and slipped into his coat pocket. A list of books to read. A tiny drawing of a tree. A reminder to get more cinnamon. Sometimes when walking through a bookstore or catching a familiar scent, he felt the echo of her beside him. She became part of the landscape of his memory. Not central, but always present. He never tried to look her up. Not even when the internet made that easy. There was no heartbreak, no regret, no unfinished story begging to be told. Just a stretch of time that belonged only to them. And even years later, he could still smell the bread from downstairs and feel the weight of her head on his shoulder. Sometimes that was enough. And sometimes, in the space between sleep and waking, he'd find himself walking the old neighborhood in a dream, turning the corner just in time to see her, always a few steps ahead, always just out of reach, still wearing that burgundy scarf. He never called out to her, because in the dream, he didn't need to. She always turned, smiled like she already knew he was there, and kept walking. And that too was enough. Thank you for listening. Until the next heartbeat in a story. Subscribe and stay for more love in every word.